my son, who usually does the morning rabbit chores, goes down the next day and he's like, there's pink aliens all over the floor.
Inside of the city, the people are crazy, out of their minds, they ain't got a clue. We gone away, headed west for Montana, left family and friends, all I got now is you. We both got new jobs, a house and a homestead, thinking this was the life, all that there'd be. After our firstborn, you had to stay home. That's when the work got in the way for me. Well, I started farm hop life. We'll come to your farm to help and to wander. Me and the family, a truck and an RV. Send us a message and there will be.
Hey, Matt.
I was hitting record, and it takes a second before it starts to go. This is a Farm Hop Life podcast, a traveling homestead family. I'm Matt DeRozier. Tonight, my guest is Ben Husmann. His wife, Allison, and their two kids moved from Chicago to Western North Carolina a year ago, and they started a homestead. Allison homeschools. Ben works a tech job remote, and they're currently raising angoras, chickens, and geese, planting trees, and planning for the future. I mean, you're only in it for a year. I'm curious about the progress that you've made thus far. Let's get into that a little bit. So
Yeah,
you moved from Chicago to North Carolina. Smart.
that's right.
Smart move. That was the first smart move. Is this your first homestead?
Yeah, this would be the first, and I'm really hesitant to even call it a homestead. I feel better now that we have chickens. I feel like I can call it a homestead, but yeah,
The
that's what we're
imposter
working
syndrome
toward.
thing? Sure.
Yeah, well, not so much imposter, but just like I need to feel like I'm actually doing the stuff. When we first moved out here, um, should probably roll back a little bit, but when
Yeah.
we were in Chicago, we had thought about moving to Upper Michigan for quite some time and had kind of scoped out different areas that we liked, and because we would often go there for vacation and kind of looking at that as a place. And then the COVID thing threw everybody's world up in the air, and my wife went to Charlotte, North Carolina, to visit a friend, and they went hiking in the area that we live now. And she came home and she's like, I want to move there. And pretty much all the things that we loved about Chicago that were valuable to us sort of had just disappeared in the COVID era. So my kid's school shut down. My wife started homeschooling, which was something that she was thinking about doing anyway. And my job went remote, and then I subsequently got another job that was all remote. And it was kind of like, well, why don't we try to go somewhere? And we started looking in this area, and it didn't take us too long to find a place. And then all of a sudden, we were moving, and I kind of like, my motivation was to get out of the city, to be closer to nature. I grew up going on vacations to national parks, and I really like being outside. It's part of what makes me feel alive. And so, as we were thinking about coming here, like I was thinking about, well, so we've got 20 acres of forest behind the house, forest mountain slope
Nice.
behind the house, and then about the house and in the front is about 10 acres, and it's slopey. I mean, it's not. It's a lot of it's pasture slope, and you know, I was thinking, well, I got to figure out how to maintain this forest, and I want to make trails through the forest, and I'm like reading books on forestry and thinking about, well, that's where my head was at, and my wife was thinking more about some gardening and some things like that, and then we came out here, and we were just overwhelmed with how beautiful it was, but also just I sort of had a totally different take on what I needed to do here.
Sure.
as so, it's like all of a sudden, instead of like focusing on the forest, which I've only even walked up to the top of the mountain once. It's like I'm looking at these front slopes that are overgrown. And so one of the first things I did was bought a chainsaw, figured out how to use a chainsaw, bought a wood chipper, and started clearing a slope that's sort of in front of our house for an orchard space. So I cut down a bunch of, like, in this area, tulip poplars grow like weeds. And so
Hmm.
the lady who had lived here before, she was a widower and had lived here on her own for, I don't know, 8 or 9 years. And she maintained the property pretty well, but she let a lot of things just grow up, as you would if you were, a lady in your 70s living on this land. So I basically just took out, probably hundreds of these trees that were anywhere from saplings to, I don't know, 8 or 9 inches in diameter, and cleared a space for some orchard. My wife bought a bunch of pawpaw trees, and she thought she was buying them to be delivered in the spring, and they were delivered in the fall. So it was like a mad rush. It's like we got the notification, pawpaws are coming in a week, and I'm like, what? So I'm clearing and chipping, and we're figuring out how to terrace this slope enough to make good spots for the trees, and then out there in the middle of the night, like all homesteaders are, with headlamps and pounding T-posts and doing all that stuff in the middle of the night during the rain to get the trees in. Um, so that's kind of been the story of a lot of our planting and our tree planting, is like order stuff and then sort of prepare. And then when it when it gets closer, it's like, oh, it's go time. We've got to do it now. Um, but yeah, we planted a bunch of pawpaws and a number of cherry trees and peach trees and some chestnut trees, and nothing on the scale. I mean, I'm like super humbled by the scale of some of the folks that we're on Twitter with or whatever,
Mhm.
that are planting hundreds of trees. But on top of homeschooling and having a full-time job and everything else, like I feel pretty pretty proud of what we've been able to pull off in a year. So we planted a bunch of trees and a bunch of berry bushes, and and then uh, and really just trying to just learning how to kind of exist in a totally different environment.
Right.
We had In Chicago, we had a bit of a yard, and we did have a bit of a garden, and I cultivated mushrooms in the garage, and we did some other things. So it wasn't like growing was like completely foreign, but it's the scale of having a yard that's less than a quarter, or a whole property that's less than a quarter of an acre in Chicago, to having 10 acres and pasture that I need to tend to, and whatever else is happening, trees falling down, and uh, driveways getting washed out, and just like you name it, whatever, plumbing issues. um,
Yeah.
and so all the things that kind of come along with really being a landowner or a homeowner were things that we needed to figure out too. So um, a lot of our time has just been like, okay, well, what do we do, with this pasture? I don't have fence, so and we're not sure what our permanent plan is. So it's like, well, I want to get some ruminants out there to start doing the work for me, but I also need fence, and I also am
Right.
not sure how I want to organize the property, because I think if I would have been thinking homestead when we bought the property, I might have. I mean, I love the place we're at, and actually really glad we're here, but I think I might have chosen a little differently, because our house is on the slope, and pretty much all the areas that we might tend to require walking up and down hills. And so
Sure.
we don't have anything that's like walk out your walk out your door and have a reasonably flat approach to anywhere there that could be animals or a garden or anything like that. So that's a little bit of a downside to where we're
Sure.
at. um I don't know, I'm just rambling, I can't remember what you asked me. Year one stuff, but it was not what I we're doing stuff that I didn't expect to be doing. I kind of
Sure.
sort of
Yep.
imagine it in my mind as, oh, this will kind of be like living in Chicago, only I'll walk outside and it'll be beautiful. And, you know, I don't know, there won't be any takeout.
Right. Right.
Well, all
Right.
those things are true. Those things are true, but that's not really what I feel like we're up to here anymore, which is different, and appropriate.
Yeah.
So
When I asked you to give people a little bit of a backstory, when I asked you to come on the podcast, you're like, hey, just I'm curious what you do. And you're like, I don't really have a whole lot to share. And I'm like, I don't know, you must have like some wisdom. And you basically horse laughed in my face. And that hurt, but I got over it. No, I'm just kidding. And it's just like first year stuff that you screw up. And the other point I was going to make was you got red pilled really hard. You got out of Chicago and you homeschooled your kids and you started a homestead. Like
yeah, I suppose that's true.
You're not supposed to eat the whole bowl.
Well, that would be an interesting conversation to have with my wife too, because we both not that I want to talk about politics, but it sort of overlaps with kind of these political spheres. I think we were in Chicago, and I think both of us would have self-described as fairly liberal people, and we've recently been having conversations like, oh, I think we're conservatives now, aren't we? It's like, how did that happen? No, but I mean, it's like, well, I started, like, it was like, I think about maybe 6 months ago, I would have said, well, I'm pretty much liberal, but I've got these viewpoints that align with conservatives. I'm not really sort of independent. And now it's like, well, most of my viewpoints seem to align with conservatives. And I don't feel, I mean, I guess both of us would feel kind of politically homeless in that sense. But I think before we moved out here, I think the thing that's driving a lot of what we're doing is this idea of embodiment and being in the real world, and not being. I mean, obviously, I'm spending time on Twitter. I have a job that's an email job, as folks like to say. But be like having a life where mostly we're embodying ourselves. We're not out in the metaverse. We're here with people and with things. We're taking care of animals. We're cooking our food. Even there's just not like, even if I wanted to like not make my own food, there's not a lot of options here. So it's like I
Right.
enjoy cooking, and that's part of why we love food, and making and wanting to grow our own food is because we love quality ingredients, and I really love to cook. That's part of all of it. But yeah, I think what's driving a lot of what I think our red pilling is just being present and in our bodies and doing things in the real world, uh, and not not the other thing,
Right.
if you will.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
So, man, I got to be honest with you. I've heard getting into some of what you're doing. I've heard the name angoras before, and I didn't look at it. What is that?
They're Angora rabbits, and so
Okay.
they're
This is
the
a breed.
really super fluffy rabbits.
Okay.
And so what my wife, she knits, and she wanted to keep some rabbits for fiber. And so last fall around Thanksgiving, we got 2 angoras, and the lady who sold them to us talked her into taking these 2 brothers, which I think was a mistake. And so we have these little two guys, and then and the thing about young boy rabbits is they're really friendly until they hit puberty, and then they want to kill each other. So we used to put them out on the deck. There's an area of the deck where, just to let them walk around, I put up a bit of fence, and we used to put them out on the deck together, and they were kind of living together. And then there was just one morning, like, I go to take them out and I set them down on the deck, and it's like, the day before they were just friendly as could be. That day I dropped them down, it was like, yeah, we want to kill each other. And so it was like, whoa, stop, we got to separate them. So we separated them, and then we found a lady who is trying to rehome a female, and then we went on a breeding adventure, which was kind of fun and interesting. It's been a learning experience. But the funny thing about angoras is they're so fluffy. They've got so much hair that you actually, like, in order to facilitate breeding, you've got to like trim and shave all this hair so that they can even like get the parts together. So we did. So the first time we tried to breed them, it's like the rabbits' names, the male rabbits are named Rampus and Rumpus. And so we had Rumpus outside trying to breed with our female, which is Grenadine. And Rumpus he is humping her all over the deck, and it's like nothing is happening. And so we had to try the next day after doing some shaving. Did a bit of shaving, a little bit of trimming, and then the next day. So when a male rabbit like does its deed, you know that it's done, because they basically like flop over. So he's humping her around, and then all of a sudden he's like, and then the other cool thing about rabbits and why they're so prolific in terms of breeding is that the females actually release the egg in response to the sperm or whatever. I guess it's sperm, right? They're all sperms. And so you don't have to like time an ovulation cycle or anything. It's like, so pretty much if the guy passes out, there's going to be babies. And so we started the clock on Grenadine, and she's, it's going on, and it's, supposed to be 30 to 33 days, like clockwork. They're going to have their babies, and we're kind of getting things ready, and it's day 34. And we're like, yeah, maybe we just didn't get it done. Maybe we thought we did, and we didn't. And then my son, who usually does the morning rabbit chores, goes down the next day, and he's like, there's pink aliens all over the floor. And
how old's your son? 10.
So he goes down, he's like, there's pink aliens all over the floor. And I'm like, what? And I ran down there, and of course we made some mistakes, because you do this when you don't know what you're doing. And the cage we had Grenadine in didn't have tight enough bars to keep the babies in. So she lets out this litter, and they're all just crawling for whatever. And most of them crawl out of the cage and fall to the garage floor.
Oh no.
So I've got all these pink rabbit babies. And if you've ever seen rabbit babies, they're ugly as sin. I mean, they really are they're horribly ugly. They do look like little pink aliens. And so I'm picking these guys up, and I'm like, oh, I can't believe it. They're all going to die. And, and so we're all frantic. And the other thing about bunnies apparently is that the mothers don't have a strong mothering instinct to start with. They have to acquire it somehow. So a lot of times the first litter of a mother, they won't take care of it, or they'll lose a lot. So so we were trying to make a nest, because she wasn't going to make a nest even when she was pregnant. So we were making a nest, and we're trying to put in her hair and do all this stuff and get the bunnies in. And like day one, they all live. And then the next day, like 2 of them are sitting outside the box, and they're dead. And then there's more dead outside the box. And it's like a week goes by, and we've got 2. We've got 2 healthy baby bunnies that she is taking care of. And so I felt we all, at that point, we felt like it was a win. But we're hoping the next time that we breed her, because she did what was interesting. And I don't have any experience with this at all. I could be saying things that are totally wrong, but just, you read and you try to learn and grow. But, there was a point that when she started taking care of some of them, and her like mothering instinct kicked in, and then we felt like, okay, this is going to work out. But she sort of did like pick these two as winners and sort of cast the other ones out,
Hmm.
which was interesting to see. And so we have two baby bunnies, and then the two older guys, and the lady. And anyway, we got to get rid of some of them. I guess it's too many bunnies. I would like to
Sure.
do a meat bunny operation, um, with a different breed, because angoras are just you can't get them wet, or they're hair mats, and there's a lot of grooming involved, that if I was doing meat rabbits, I wouldn't have to worry about that.
Right.
So I'm
They're
gonna,
almost like for a show, like the state fair or
yeah,
something.
little more for show. But
4-H.
but my wife Allison's been, she brushes out. So you brush it out, the fiber, and their hair just kind of comes out. You collect it, and she's got this cool drum thing that takes all the fibers and puts them in a line, and then she can spin, off of the drum. So it's cool. She's collecting a lot of fiber, and
Yeah.
we'll see where that goes. At some point, she'll be knitting something with fiber from our bunnies, which is, it's kind of cool.
Yeah. Does she have a
And
plan for the first project?
no, not right now. She does one big project a year for herself, and then she'll do a lot of other small things. So she's finishing up a sweater right now.
That doesn't sound like a
Um,
small project.
no, that's the big one.
Okay.
That's like the year one. And then she does, like, she'll do hats and other things for people. And I always lose my hats, so I think she's done making me hats.
You're just gonna be cold. You
That's
don't
true.
get it anymore.
It's
That's
true.
that's funny. So you're planning for the future for your property.
Yep.
What kind of, so you haven't done a whole lot yet. So what kind of practices or methods or techniques are you thinking you want to do on your property?
Yeah. So one of the things that Allison just started doing is she's taking a permaculture certification course.
Nice. That's
And
cool. From who?
so
Do you remember or no?
she'll be sad that I don't remember.
That's
when
okay.
she
I was
when
just
and if she
curious.
listens to this. No, I don't know who, but the idea, of course, is you have to have a site project as part of that certification. So she's going to use our site as that. And so that's kind of one of the things that we've been holding off on, is being able to have a really smart, more permanent plan in place.
Yes.
We have a small garden. We had hoped to have a bigger garden, but I had a surgery in the winter and didn't recover as quickly as I thought I would. So a lot of the spring projects didn't happen the way that we thought they were going to happen. So we have a
I know how
small
that
garden,
goes.
and I instead of building a permanent chicken coop, I ended up building a chicken tractor, in a mad dash to get them out of the brooder and onto the yard. And that worked out good. I'm actually glad we ended up doing that, because where I thought I was going to put a coop, now that I've been taking care of the chickens, there's no way I would have wanted to have the coop there. So I've read different people talk about, I do want permanent structures and permanent fencing and things like that on the
Yep.
property, but it is interesting to be able to try with temporary things and see what the pitfalls of different places are.
Yeah.
Because even right now, I've got this one hill pasture that I run the chicken tractor up and down. And at the point I moved him over there, I'm like, oh yeah, this is the spot. This is the permanent poultry spot. And I have some ideas about how I want to make a few different pens and things like that. But even as I've been working up and down the hill, I've realized, oh, you know what? Like, a structure at the bottom of the hill, it doesn't look like it's that different, but the difference that it, like, the amount of friction that it creates when the tractor's down toward the bottom of the hill and I've got to bring all the feed and water down there versus in the middle versus in the top. It's like it makes a big difference. And so I'm like, well, I
Mhm.
don't think I'm gonna. And I always thought, well, I'm gonna put it at the bottom of the hill near kind of where this tree is. And I'm like, no, I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna bring the more permanent structures up to the middle because I know over time that that friction is gonna it's just gonna
Right.
hurt. you know. And there's this like I really like this. I mean, I think this is part of some of the permaculture zone thoughts
Yes.
is aligns with this idea of friction, which I picked up um, along the way in my life, where if you can really if you by adding or removing friction to any sort of activity, you can kind of sort of not control your behavior, but influence your behavior when you're in a mindset to know what you want instead of just
Yeah.
in the moment. So like um, if I know that tomorrow I want to, this like a bad example, but let's say I want to go running. I don't run, but let's say I did. Um, you know, I can make sure I've got all my clothes and my shoes and stuff ready so that when I get out of bed, it's just there versus, oh, I kind of want to go running, but where are my shoes? And God, all the socks are in the dryer. It's like it's easy to let it fall
Yeah.
aside. So, and then you can use that conversely if you want to stop doing something, is to sort of artificially create friction around something you don't want to do. But so I like that concept, and I think I think it's important, especially on this land, because when things are far away, like they're far away. They're out of sight, out of mind. We planted some willows down by our creek um, for um, for doing some weaving with, and they have gotten weeded once because it's like we drive by it all the time.
Hmm.
But you, if you're going to walk down there to weed, you're going to pass 5 or 6 other things that need to be done on your way down there. You'll never. And so far, I've never made it back down. I weeded it once, but I gotta actually do that again. Now that I'm talking about it, I remembered it.
That's one of those things you're just when you drive by it and you got 5 minutes, you're just gonna have to throw the vehicle in park and get out and just weed for five
Exactly.
minutes and then go back to up to the house.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, in terms of like our long-term plans, we'd like, my wife really wants like a mini Jersey cow for milk.
Nice. That'd be cool.
And I'm okay. I think, okay, maybe we could do that. I'm sure we will. She also would like alpacas for fiber. Um, and, uh, and we definitely want a couple of wethers, a couple of goats that for brush eating, and
Okay.
I don't know. I'd like to keep pigs, at least a couple again for clearing and for eating, and then we'll see. Maybe we've got enough room for some beef cattle too. I don't. We've got a fair amount of room and we have really good pasture. Um, we're very fortunate. I think it was well kept throughout the years. So I want to put it to use. Like right now, it's not it's going back to the land. It gets cut and then it feeds the soil, but uh, I'd rather be feeding food. Or I'd rather be making food out of it. So
Exactly.
yeah,
Couple questions.
sure.
Uh, the grass. Have you had an analysis done on what it is you actually have? And I only ask
No.
because my very first interview, he's like a first time farmer. I mean, like big farm. I mean, he went big, like 120 acres, and
Wow.
he got cattle, and he's like, hell yeah, look at all this pasture. This is awesome. Like this looks great, and it his cows just weren't eating it. He's like, you're picky. Go eat. And they just like came like right back and he just needed to feed him hay. He's like, what the heck? And so he went to like the county extension office basically and they came out and did an analysis, and they're like, yeah, they basically can't eat any of this, at least in their current state. Now, for the specific type of like, it's like cheatgrass and mustard is what he has.
Okay.
He's like, the extension office said, like, they can, when it's like the seeds are just too sharp and pokey, it pokes them in the mouth and they don't like it. Now, when the grass is only like 4 inches high or whatever, they can eat it then, but that's very early in the year. And so he's working really hard to, he's not going to like till it or anything like that. Like he's using like chickens to tear it up. I actually don't know how he's like reseed. No. Okay. Here's what he's doing. He's irrigating it because cheatgrass hates lots of water. And so he's, basically overwatering it to try to bring up other plants that may be down into the soil.
Dormant.
So I don't know if that's something to look into. Just to
I sure hope that's not the case. I don't think it will be, because I know that before we were here, the lady who was living here, somebody was taking the hay for feed.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So somebody was coming and cutting and taking the hay.
Well, that's a good indicator that it's quality.
And I had a couple of guys come out. So when the first year we moved here, I'm like, what do I do with this hay field? And I knew that the lady had somebody take it, but the guy who was taking it he was an old timer and he was done. He wasn't going to be doing it anymore. So I started asking around. I didn't know how to ask around, but I started asking around. Does anyone want this? Like, please come take it for free, whatever, cut my grass and take it. Basically is what I'm thinking. And I had a few guys come out and look, and they were like, I really like your field, but it's not, it's small enough that it's not worth it for me to bring all my equipment out here an hour away from where I'm at.
Sure.
This year, I was hoping I would find somebody closer to do the same thing. And I think we just got busy and I missed probably a good window. And then, but the guys who I had come bush hog, his cousin lives in the area and probably will take it next year. So if I don't have anything eating it. But yeah, and everybody who came out and looked was like, oh, I really like this field. Like, this is a good field, but I'm not going to take it. I'm not going to come do it. It's a little slopey too, but
sure.
Not too much.
Is it already fenced, or does it need to be fenced?
It needs a perimeter fence. There's an old, so one of the cool things about our property is, so we really don't, we have people, we sort of live on the side of a mountain, and on the other side, there's a couple of houses that you can see in the winter, but you can barely see them in the summer. And then sort of next to us, and they're not really our like street neighbor, but they're sort of our hillside neighbor, is a guy who lives there who's been there for 30 years. And he's become a pretty good friend of ours. He's an older gentleman, but he built his house about 30 years ago. And one of the things he did when he was building the house is he paid this watercolor artist that he liked, to come out and paint a picture from what is now his deck. And the coolest thing about this is what they painted the picture of is his view, which is our land. And so there's this sort of a snapshot. It's not a photograph, but there's kind of a snapshot of what our land looked like 30 years ago. And there are all these old locust posts and barbed wire that are kind of intermittent through the perimeter. And you can see, like, grazing up and down the slopes are all these, cattle from 30 years ago. So that was definitely happening here 30 years ago. And then I don't know when that stopped, but at some point it did. But there's a lot of remnants of those old fences around, but they're not viable, for keeping animals in anymore.
Sure. I was gonna say, you could have someone pay you to have cattle on that pasture, and you manage it for them just to see if you even like it before you get your own. You're like,
why would you want to do that? Why would you want to? test something out like that.
I don't know.
No, that's a wise thing. I I feel like what's interesting about this stuff is like I'm not even I'm not really a pet. Like I've never been really a pet person. My first marriage we had two cats and I kind of was okay with them. I liked them sometimes, but for the most
I
part, I
like
think
them sometimes.
well, they piss on your shoes, and they make stuff
Yep.
stink, and it's like I just, it's just too much. so, so, um, but being out, like one of the things that has surprised me is how much I truly enjoy taking care of our chickens and geese, and I would not have expected that. I don't feel like quite the same way about the rabbits, but being like I go out and I let them out of the tractor and I feed and water them every morning and I put them away at night. Sometimes the kids help, and I don't know. Like I just I find it really satisfying. It's surprised me, and it's really surprised me how much I enjoy them as animals and how much I enjoy taking care of them. And so I feel like the thing that I have the most trepidation about is anything dairy related because my
Sure.
my mom grew up on a dairy farm and I grew up in Iowa. So her father was a pretty big had a pretty big dairy operation. And I grew up hearing about how when you have dairy you never leave. You you know
Yep.
you're on the cow's schedule. And I think it'd be a little bit different if if we didn't have a big dairy operation, right? But it's one of those things that makes me it's like I grew up with the horror stories all my life about that. So I have a little trepidation there, but
Right.
in terms of these other animals, it's interesting. I want to get some pigs and turkeys and just hang out with them and feed them and make them happy and then eat them.
Make them happy and then eat them. I
Yeah.
like that. I'm gonna write that one down. Um, so you mentioned willow, and you were gonna
Mhm.
do some weaving. Are you gonna do like a wattle like fence? Is that what your plan is?
No, this is not me. This is not my plan, but my wife is so there's a way to grow them where they grow up like reeds, essentially for kind of like basket weaving or
Okay.
more craft weaving. But I know that, there are people that use these to make like little structures and, you know, things like things like that. Probably that's probably what it'll end up being.
Okay.
Um, Both my wife and I have like I graduated with a degree in drawing, painting, and printmaking. Um, and my wife went to art school and or studied art in school, and we both have art background and are very interested in making things with our hands and for in different craft ways and in different like I guess
Right.
fine art ways as well. So I've been like messing around carving spoons and other amateury stuff, but it's like really fun. It's like if I can sit around at night and with a piece of wood and you know chip away at it and make something kind of beautiful and funky looking, like
Yeah.
that's a night well spent. So I enjoy that. We're kind of just getting into like all the things that we might be able to do out here. What are the things that we might produce that are food, and what are the things that we might produce that are materials to create useful things with or beautiful things with. At some point, I really want to build some goofy cabin up on the mountainside. It's like one of those things
Goofy.
that, yeah, like funky, like weird, just not like functional, but just like eccentric, weird, not not a box, but just like
All
I don't
right.
know, weird shapes, weird functions. So my wife and I had this idea before
The
we came out
Frank
here.
Lloyd Wright made a cabin.
No, no, more funky than that.
Oh.
Have you ever heard of? This is not what I want to do, but have you ever heard of the House on the Rock? It's kind of an attraction in Wisconsin, and it's a real spectacle now. but the origin of this is there was this guy, and I can't remember his name, and he bought this piece of land in the Bluffs in Wisconsin, and he and his friends started just building this structure, and they kept building onto it, and pretty soon people used to come up and walk up and ask to see it, and so they started charging admission, and it's turned into this like insane place. So there's the original house that you start the tour on, but then it's also become like this crazy weird museum of odd collectibles and weird stuff. But I guess the inspiration there, the reason I think of it is like, he just found this site and said, okay, well, what kind of structure just kind of plays along with this bluff in this area? And like, I'm going to make this weird, sitting room where you go down below and there's all this stone above you. And, I don't know, just interesting architectural elements. So I want to play around with stuff like that, using the materials that are already out there.
I'm not going to lie. This place looks awful.
I said it was a spectacle.
Yes. Okay. So for those on the video,
if you're Midwestern, you might really know it already.
Look at So I'm actually from Minnesota. So here's, I don't know.
So that's the infinity room that comes out from the
218 feet long, and it has 3,264 windows, and is counterbalanced by 105 yards of concrete. That's what. And then
so
there's like
the marketing is terrible.
There or something.
There is a big fake. There's a lot of fake stuff. Yeah. It's sad.
Like this looks gaudy. This looks awful.
It's pretty awesome though. It's a spectacle. You have to enjoy spectacle. And exit.
Is there a canoe? There's a canoe in it.
I think this one is like, is it Moby Dick or something? It's a portrayal of something. It's so poorly demonstrated by these photos that I feel sad. That's the like infinity room when you're in
Japanese,
which is kind of cool.
But
it's all over the place.
Yeah,
there's collections of weird stuff. It's like a house. See, that's part of the original house. That's
like someone with like ADHD or something like built this thing.
Exactly.
Like, okay, so we got this old. So like this room looks cool. I like this. Like
that's part of the original house. Yeah.
I could live here. Or the infinity room. That would be kind of cool.
Yeah, that's weird. That's just a collection of stuff. So there's a bunch of see, this is part of the house area. Well, actually, I think that's the entryway. That's not the house area. But anyway,
this is weird.
It's a weird place. It's like a spectacle.
And all of a sudden, it's a village.
Yeah, they've got a fake old Main Street and apothecary.
How big is this place?
Oh, you have to.
They got a whole garden.
You could probably walk through it in a day if you like hoofed it.
It would take me a whole day to see everything.
Yeah.
Jeez. Okay. Well. Okay. Well, I have
to be honest. I feel slightly embarrassed.
Hey, but man, you can't help.
I grew up going there, and it's like when you're a kid and you walk into a place like that, and it's like especially the original house, which they showed almost no pictures of, is you kind of come in there and it's like, the ceilings are low and there's it's built around all the stone that's the side of the mountain. And that's what I think is inspiring to me. It's like the first house part is very site specific. And it's just like, when I think about it, it's like, how could you sort of meld like a structure that's useful and maybe like a retreat cabin where you've got like a bed and a place to write and, a little sink or something, and then a beautiful view, and you're part of the mountain, and you're pulling, like I've got these spaces up on the side of the mountain that are like these beautiful huge rocks and stuff like that. How can I take a space like that and start to play with building, shelter and like a beautiful sort of solitary retreat,
Yeah, that would be sweet.
So that's the reason I brought it up. But I like weird shit. I like the weird, like I don't want to live like a gaudy life, but I do like I do enjoy over the top spectacle, as sort of a you know like a spectacle, something to see, something that's over the top.
Um, I once saw Adam Savage at a Maker Faire, and part of his little speech. He's like, "You can't help what you're inspired by, even if it's weird." So,
That's true.
you know, do you whatever you want.
What's so funny is we're totally the opposite of gaudy in any way, but I like to see it sometimes. I just like to see, like, I don't know, growing up, like going to a museum, and like I remember being just enthralled by all of the like or elaborate, suits of armor with all the pounded, decoration
Sure.
and all that stuff. It's like that. Just, I don't know, craft in detail, but I know a lot of that wasn't craft in detail.
That was just someone having fun, and you know what? That's okay. It's
That's
crazy
right.
that I've never heard of that place before. Um,
People go there to get married, and
I'm
people go
surprised
to a
you
lot of
get
weird
it.
places to go. No,
Where were we? Uh, that's okay.
I
We'll
don't
we'll
know.
we'll we'll
Talking
get this
about
back
stuff.
on. We'll get this back on track. Um, so let's talk about some stuff that worked that you tried and worked well. Did your pawpaws make it after you planted them?
Um, most have
Most have.
made
Okay.
it. Yeah. So I think we planted 10, and I think there are 7 that are very healthy now. Um, Part of the issue was that two of them we gave very little chance because we kind of ran out. I ran out of energy to
Mm,
to make these terraces on this hillside, which is like I had no idea what I was getting into. But we wanted to build these like 6 by 6 foot squares, that would be fenced off because we have deer everywhere. So that's one of the challenges with growing any of these trees is that I can't just dig a hole and put a tree there. First of all, I can't just dig a hole because half of what I'm hitting is rock. And
hmm.
so that's
I'm
that's the
familiar.
first challenge, you know. And then beyond that, like putting something in the ground, it's got to be protected from the deer because especially like right this year is crazy. We have so many deer, and if whatever's not in a fence is getting nibbled on or destroyed completely.
Hmm.
So it's not just planting a tree. It's like, okay, I've got to build this 6 by 6 terrace, into the hillside to do this stuff. And I ran out of steam, and then we ended up planting a couple of them really lazily in a spot with no protection. And we transplanted them the next year. Surprisingly, they made it through the winter, but then they didn't make it too long this year. So I lost
Mm.
2 that way, and then I lost another one through whatever means. So um, I think we're doing all right there. All the cherry trees we planted are thriving. All the peach trees we planted are thriving. We lost a couple of wild chestnuts to root rot, which again was probably due to our neglect getting them in the ground fast enough. Um, and then we have some hybrid chestnuts that are doing well. So, and all the berry bushes that we planted are doing well. So it's just, I don't know. Most of what we've lost has been due to some kind of neglect, like the how do we get them in the ground fast enough? you
Yeah.
know, and it can be one of those things where it's like, well, they're sitting on the deck and they're waiting for us, and we're going to do it this such and such night, and then this thing comes up, or I have to work late, and then the next day it's pouring rain, and it's like, and pretty soon you're 8 days in, and it's like, we got to get these trees in the ground or we've lost our trees.
Yeah.
That's a lot of what we've encountered. So I want, like, I think ideally I would be the kind of person who could say, okay, we know we're going to plant this many trees, and I'm going to build all these spaces for them, and then we'll order them, and they'll come, and it'll all just happen in a really pretty way. And
That's a
it's
nice dream you have.
no, I mean that's how it could happen in my mind. But the reality of the situation is that we're dealing we're constantly overwhelmed with stuff that we have to do. I've got stuff on my list that has been on my list since March that hasn't been touched because
Right?
there's always this order of priority. Like, there's probably at the top is like an animal will die if I don't do this,
Mhm.
and then below that is like some kind of tree or plant that's important is going to die, or we're not going to be able to harvest if I don't do this, so and then there's the land stuff where it's like, no one can drive on my driveway because the rain washed it all out, and I need to solve that so that we can use our driveway, or there's
You're
all these
putting out
different levels of
fires
priority.
and not building up
Exactly.
the infrastructure to actually get to where you want.
Yeah.
You're just playing catch up all the time. I get it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I have a lovely lawnmower, but it's like it has not been running at full capacity all year because I keep breaking it as soon as I fix it, and that alone is just a challenge, just to stay on top of that. Because here, I know there's a lot of drought in the United States, but I could use like a couple days where it won't rain. I mean, we have been like oversaturated where I'm at right now. It's
Mm.
been raining. I mean, things aren't like we're probably okay. Things aren't dying, but it's just there's rain every day. And it's like a few hours of rain every day, and then it's super humid, and then the next day there's going to be a few hours of rain, and then you might get one day when there's none. But the ground has not been dry here in weeks, and so it's just, if my mower's not working on the one day it's dry, then I might not be able to use it. I might have an opportunity to mow for another week, or or
Right.
whatever it might be. So that's been a bit of a struggle. just just trying to do stupid things like stay on top of mowing a path so that it's easier to get to the garden, or it's easier to do whatever it might be. One of the coolest things this year, though, that I didn't take advantage of last year is we have an enormous amount of wild blackberry brambles on our property. And last year, I went out and picked a few, but it was such our property was so overgrown that it was like just even getting to stuff like that was just harder to find and harder to get to. And this year, I was like, I want to pick as many blackberries as I possibly can. And I think next year I can do more. But, we picked about probably over 10 pounds of really nice tasting wild blackberries,
Nice.
and made some jam and jelly, and have some other stuff in the freezer that I need to do some with. But that's really been cool because it's like we didn't do anything to get that. You know, I I mowed a path to get out there, and I trimmed a little bit so my kids could go out without, you know, being over their heads in thorns. But um, you know, it, that's the kind of stuff living out here that's really cool. Is just there's things that you don't even that you can just enjoy without working too hard for. Go out an hour every few days and pick a couple pounds of blackberries while they're in season.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. Pretty cool.
Yeah. Do more of that.
Yeah.
Do you hunt at all?
I don't yet.
Okay. I was just
It's
curious with all the deer you have.
Yeah, no, I would like to take a deer this fall. But I need to do all the things that I would need to do to kill a deer and process it. I've got a couple of good neighbors that are happy to help me, but yeah, it won't. Like, if I could shoot a deer from my deck, you know, without having to be a very good shot. I mean, I could throw a rock at a deer if it was, and hit it. on any given day. So
Right.
at least the first year until they're scared of me, I think it'll be pretty easy to take something out here.
It is interesting how that works. We used to have deer just like all over. Like it wouldn't be weird to have like 10 deer in my yard at any given time. And I don't even have that big a yard. I'm only on 2 acres. But the guy up the hill who's on a bigger lot, he and his buddies like shot like 3 or 4 of them or something like that. And they have been very like skittish since then and very like, I don't know. They not as like free range, I guess. They're like, oh, whoa, like we should probably be careful.
I think that's how it is.
Yep.
This area that we live in, like, well, the lady who lived in our house before us, she used to feed them, and so I think they got a habit of coming around here. But there's also, I mean, there are some people that hunt in kind of along the road where I live, but not too many. And so I think they see the houses that are up here as sanctuaries. Like there's they're all almost always asleep on the pasture that's closest to my house. Like if I go out late with a headlamp, it's like all the glowing eyes are looking at me, which freaked me out the first time I saw that. I'm walking down the hill and my headlamp sweeps and it's like all these sets of eyes and I'm like, what the fuck is that?
Do you guys have that many? Do you have many predators where you are?
There are definitely wild dogs and coyotes and foxes. There are bear up here too. I have not seen any, but last year our neighbor saw one walking down through our pasture along the creek a couple of times last year. This year I haven't. I know people who live up further on the mountain see it a little bit more often, but there definitely are predators. Our good friends who are neighbors of ours down the way, they had coyote take some of their ducks and some of their chickens that they free range. But they have a donkey now that seems to take care of everybody.
Good.
No, but yeah, so I haven't had anything taken. I run a tractor and then I run a polyelectric poultry fence around it. And so far so good, but I'm waiting for the day when I go out and it's a bloody mess.
I only ask because we have very different experiences, you and I, when you step outside and you see glowing eyes at you.
Oh, you see different glowing eyes?
It's so far it's always been deer. But last year I caught on my doorbell camera a mountain lion on my front porch and it stole my shoe.
You're kidding.
No,
it's gone, completely gone.
My shoe is gone. It ran away with it. I have it on my YouTube if anybody wants to check that out. Just mountain lion stole my shoe. And so when I go outside and I see eyes, like my heart like just like jumps out my chest for a second. And I'm trying to like figure out like the outline of like where, like, okay, is that a dumb deer? Yeah, okay, that's a dumb deer. Good.
I know that. So. When I like to do a fire outside because we have like an out garage that's kind of like half pinball arcade and half my tools and outdoor stuff. And then so I have a fire pit out there and I like to do that at night, but man, there'll be a lot of nights when at a certain point the wild dogs or coyotes start yelping up the mountain and it's like I could sit there and I can know, with almost full certainty that I'm completely 100% safe where I'm at, but at the same time there is no, like, my body cannot allow me to have my back to the mountain at that point. Like, sure. I stand up and I move to the other side of the fire and I'm like, okay, I I'm gonna have to stand here until they quiet down because it's blood curdling. I mean, it's frightening as hell when they all get going. It's you know, there's a primal sense of like I'm not in the right place if I'm hearing
Right.
this sound. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so in your short experience, this will be an interesting answer. What's been the biggest challenge in homesteading that you faced?
I mean, that's a tough one. So I think probably the biggest challenge is just managing the overwhelm of everything. So it's not so much that like any one of the tasks that are before me, you know, some are harder or more complex than others. Some require a lot of learning or a bit of study or trial and error. Some are very simple. None of them are, do I feel like are insurmountable on their own, but it's the stacking of everything. It's like,
Like getting
okay,
off the ground?
no, not get I'm good at getting started, but it's kind of like, okay, yeah, the chickens, getting a place for the chickens is a great example. So, you know, I when I graduated from college, I worked rough carpentry for a couple of years in Chicago, and I've done different kinds of woodworking since then. So I'm not some kind of great carpenter, but I can build things very handily, and it's not a problem. But I've got to build this chicken tractor to get a space for the chickens. That's great, but at the same time, I'm behind on getting the garden beds ready for what my wife wants to plant and what she has ready. And then at the same time, um, what else was happening? There's something else, whatever it is, something else is happening. And I've got work and so it's like, it's the amount of stuff, and there can just be a pressure where it's like, I cannot get all this stuff done. And I think the kind of one of the hardest things is to try and figure out, okay, I've got all this ambition as a new homesteader. There's all these things that I want to accomplish. I want to be growing and harvesting my own food, and just having to say, okay, we are letting go of the garden this year. I can't go prepare the place because I'm not recovered from my surgery and I can't be as physical as I want to be. And so we're just going to have to let all that ambition go for this year. Because if it doesn't get done by a certain point, it's just not going to get done. But we have tomatoes and tomatillos and peppers out there, and that's lovely, but it's not anywhere near what we had envisioned and planned on.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of those situations where like I said before, it's like, well, do I want all these animals to die, or do we not want to plant a garden? It's like there's just so much time that I've got and that my wife has. And, so I think that's been the hardest thing, is just to say, okay, we want to do it all. And we wish we would have moved out here, you know, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years ago, so that we could be on year 5, 10, 20 here instead of year one. But we're here at year one, and we just got to we take on too much stuff sometimes. We got to let some stuff go. And it's, I think that's been one of the hardest things, is just trying to figure out how to do everything. And I know just from talking to everybody who's doing anything like this, it's like, it's, there are some seasons where it's not as busy, but for the most part, like, you're working by a headlamp, you're up working in the morning before work, and then you're working if you have a full-time job like that. And
Yup.
then it's like, for me, a lot of times it's like, well, I like to do the cooking. So like I'll do cook for the kids, and then I'll be back outside working, or I'll take the night off because I've got to go do a building project or cut some logs, or chip some wood, or whatever thing I need to do. And you know it can be exhausting, but it's awesome. I there a lot of times there'll be some thread around where people are like, well, how, why would you want to do something like that? It's, don't you know that's hard work? And it's like, God, I mean, that's part of what I want out of it. I want to go, and I want to work, and I want to feel tired, and I want to use my body, and you know um that's part of the joy of it, I think, is being outside sweating like a pig and getting eat up by bugs, and kind of come back in all sweaty and tired.
You feel good about what you've done.
Yeah, exactly.
Would you say that that's the best part about homesteading? Is the sense of accomplishment?
I think so. I mean, I think a big part of what I like about this is what we're, the experience that we're providing for our kids too. So I actually have 5 kids.
Dang.
I have 3 older boys. My oldest is a senior in college this year. So, they grew up in the city, and with, raised really well, and they were actually homeschooled by my ex-wife for a while. And, but it's a different kind of life. And especially now, I think, because of the way sort of constant open internet and social media, and just sort of the way that technology is right now, um, we're really purposeful about raising the 2 little kids with this sort of embodied, sort of hands-on material, um, sort of life, and being out in nature and interacting with animals, and having the experience of growing your own food. And like when I was talking about picking berries, and my son and I went out the first day, I was doing this whole, or I was inspired by, what's his, I don't know what his handle is. Is it Tom Ruby or something? He was posting about making cordials or herbal cordials. And I know Nate, who you talked to, picked it up, and he made some mulberry one. And I was like, well, I'm going to make some blackberry one, and I'm going to forage herbs too. And so my son and I went out one day. We went out and we just went through the whole property and foraged, found all the kind of edible herbs and different plants that we could use to make an infusion. And we collected all this stuff, and then we went and picked the blackberries, and then we picked some rhubarb. And when we came back in, we made jam. We made a blackberry rhubarb jam, and it's like,
It sounds cool.
I've
never heard of that before.
Oh, it's delicious. I just made it because I'm like, the blackberries, they need a little something sour. So we just went, and I have a couple of patches of rhubarb that the lady who lived here before kept, and we have a lot of rhubarb. So I was like, we're going to do this. And it turned out awesome. But that experience, so you said, is that satisfaction, what I get the most out of it. But it's even more important to me is watching our son or our daughter have the same experience. And so he was out there with me, and we picked all this stuff, and the blackberries and the rhubarb, and then we cooked it up together, and we canned it together. And then he's like, for the next many, many days, he's like making toast in the morning and putting his jam on it from the food that we grew on, or picked or foraged on our land that we cooked together. And it's just, he was able to see the whole cycle. And that's the kind of, I don't know, that's the cool stuff.
Yeah.
It is kind of lighting them up on that. So that's, I guess that'd be the thing that I like probably best, is like what we're trying to do with the kids and with the family out here.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
It's the way it should be. So
I like it.
We were talking before we started recording about your hobby, restoring old pinball machines, and you're
Yeah.
telling me about all the intricate parts and all the detail that you put into it. And you say that like the troubleshooting like is related to homesteading. So like, can you explain that to somebody? Like
Yes.
how is that?
So I think the thing for me is through so I I've done part of my job, and what I've done is related to project management. So I'm not like totally organizing a big complicated project isn't foreign to me. It's kind of natural to me. But the thing about a pinball machine is just there's so many parts. It's so complex. So if you're completely taking apart a pinball machine and putting it back together, the amount of things you need to keep track of, the amount of things that you need to learn. So, metal, like working with metal, polishing metal, doing I learned how to put on an automotive clear coat. I did, there was, I've, I've done, I've had things 3D printed for me. There's just all kinds of different weird processes that I've used in the restoration process, learning schematics, learning how to solder, which I never did before, doing a little bit of soldering on circuit boards, but mostly just big wires on solenoids in the pinball machine. But it's so complicated that it really required me to create kind of a whole system for organizing very complicated projects with weird dependencies, and it really relates to a lot of the homesteading stuff because, for example, I might have like, okay, I've got these 8 different mechanisms that I'm replacing and restoring on this pinball machine. And so for each one of them, I've got like, do I need to buy any parts? Like, are parts holding me up? And so, that'd be like the first thing I call out. And then I have to figure out what those parts are and how do I order them? Where can I find them? What are the pros and cons of different replacements, all that stuff. And that it's like super direct into kind of a DIY scene or any of this homesteader stuff, because it's like, okay, well, I've got chickens. What are my options for chickens? Like, okay, there's all kinds of different coops that I could build. There's not now that, there's all kinds of different tractors that I could build. What are the pros and cons of each of the tractors? Oh, it says I need to buy this kind of wire thing. Well, how do I find that? What is it called, and where do I source it, and am I going to have to get that shipped, and like, is there any alternative for that? It's it on and on and on. But kind of taking on an enormous project like completely tearing down and rebuilding a pinball machine and finishing it and having the end result be like a pinball machine that is in many ways plays better than it ever probably has in its entire life, because of the attention I've given it to, gave me an enormous sense of confidence to take on pretty much anything, because it's like,
Yeah.
if I can do that, I can I can figure this out. you know and so we moved out here. It's like, well, I need to start cutting down trees. I've never used a chainsaw in my life. What chainsaw do I need, and what are the pros and cons of different ones? And I think I probably should have gotten a better chainsaw. But I did learn how to use a chainsaw and cut down many, 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 many trees and limbs and so forth. And like this year, I got a scythe so that I could cut some grass, like kind of on demand for our rabbits and some other things that I wanted to do without fuel and getting stinky. Because as much as
And because you broke your lawnmower.
well, that actually came in handy. I did a whole pasture scything while my lawnmower was broke. But I do like, anyway, the point is there's so much to learn, like in any of these things. And as you start getting into this and everybody's got their opinion about the best way to do it. And so it's just like any kind of research where it's like, okay, there seem to be these 3 schools of doing it. Well, what are the pros and cons of each one? And what is the scale that so and so is working at versus versus this other person? Or what infrastructure do they already have in place that makes that a really obvious answer for them and a terrible answer for me? Like all these different ways to look at these problems. And there's just no way not to make mistakes. And I think so I do my job as product manager for a software company. And so, there are these often much maligned processes that are generally referred to as agile development processes. And I don't really want to get into that because it's there's pros and cons of everything. But one of the things that I've learned through doing tons and tons of development projects is the value of working in an iterative cycle. So instead of saying, okay, I'm going to make it so that I get it perfect when I step out, I'm going to do enough to sort of make it functional, and then I'm going to improve it as I go along, and I'm going to learn faster. There's this idea of failing fast, so you learn. And so that kind of has being so much of my daily life throughout my career has really informed the way that I approach a lot of these homestead things, where it's like, okay, we're going to do this thing. I don't know what the permanent thing is, but here's how we can get started and learn a little bit and then grow from that, or pivot because we realized, like, I don't want to breed Angora rabbits. I think my wife and I agree, like, we want to breed them again because we'd like a better female. We don't really like our female. Um, and but then I think we're going to go down to, having 3 rabbits, probably 3 Angoras, and then occasionally swapping them out through a breeding process. Like, I don't want many Angoras. They're a pain in the ass to maintain
It sure sounds
and
like it. Yeah.
groom. And I just, like, it's not worth it to me.
It's like having a dog that you can't play fetch with, is what it sounds like.
But you know what? I got to tell you, they are the ones that we've raised that have grown up like with handling and people. Their temperaments are really nice. They're kind of nice, but it's a lot more like pets,
Right.
And
Right.
but yeah, I realize I don't want to do that. So I'm glad I didn't build out the be all end all rabbit system. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I think that's the point. It's like kind of dipping your toe in and seeing, okay, what about this, or what about this, or like where we built our garden has some positives because it's close to the house and it has a good sun situation, but it's also, after having planted there and having kind of worked with the soil, it's probably also not the most fertile, best place that's going to make the most productive garden for us. There are some other places on our land that might be a little further away, but if we were doing a large scale garden, would probably be a lot more productive. So, kind of learning as you go and saying, okay, this might be good for this, but when I want to expand and do something bigger, I think I'm going to go to this area.
Sure.
That kind of like continuous improvement stuff, I think, is that mindset is really good because, we work with our kids a lot on this, like kids, and I want this too, is like, I want to be like, okay, I'm going to get this project done today and it's going to be perfect. you know, I'm going to build a bookcase today from soup to nuts. I'm going to go to the lumber store and I'm going to buy everything I need, and they're going to have the perfect boards, and I'm going to pick out all the hardware that I need, and then I'm going to come home and I'm going to cut it and I'm going to fit it together and it'll be done before dinner, and that's never going to happen.
Not
So
even
if you think
close.
if you really expect that if you truly expect that that's going to happen, then you set yourself up for kind of a sense of failure, instead of saying, okay, what can I move forward today? What's reasonable? Like, how can I push myself without setting myself back the next day? Like, how do you manage all that? It's
Right. It's hard not to have the attitude like, what's gonna F me today?
yeah. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's through work and just having to reckon with the fact that deadlines are hard to make because all the unknowns. But I do think that I'm more acclimated to not having unrealistic expectations. You know,
Right.
but
Yeah,
it's
it can't be
still
pessimistic either though.
no. Like,
Yeah.
I'm like shooting for it, but it's like, if I don't if I'm working my ass off and things are going reasonably well, maybe that's going to happen. But if like a tool breaks, I don't have, it turns out I can't, like I was building this stupid thing for the rabbit cages to like make them in a vertical stack. And it's like, it's a 30-minute woodworking project. It's nothing. But, we had moved here not too long, not, it hadn't been long since we had moved there. And I go to build it. It's like, I can't find my screws anywhere. I can't find a single damn screw, And so it's like, okay, well, I'll use nails, even though in this situation, it's going to be a little more rickety and it's probably not what I would do. Then I can't find the stinking hammer. And so I'm like 2 hours into just trying to find pieces for a project that really should have taken 20 to 30 minutes and would have taken 20 to 30 minutes if I actually knew where everything was. And that's the kind of stuff that happens. And then when you live in rural, like going to Lowe's is going to be, it's an hour and a half trip. I mean, well, it's 30 plus minutes to get there, and however long I spend there, 30 plus minutes to get back. For some people who live rural, that's close, but it's still, that's an hour and a half. And that'll kill, when you're working on the edges of time, that ends up being a big chunk of Saturday or a whole evening, or whatever it is, which can really be a setback. So I'm trying to build up like better organization. We're still unpacking, and I think we're, especially in the area of like food, we've kind of figured out like what are the stuff that we're going to have lots of in the house because we never want to run out, and we bought half a hog, and then I bought a quarter of a cow. So we've got a nicely stocked meat situation in the freezer. And so when the afternoon hits and it's like, oh, what's for dinner tonight? It's like, okay, I've got stuff I can pull out of the freezer.
That's always a great feeling. Yeah,
it is. So I don't know. I don't know where I was going with any of that, but life.
that's okay.
It's normal. It's just life. It's it's all the household stuff. When we were in the city, though, I mean, I lived in Chicago for over 20 years. I mean, it's very easy to get into a situation where it's like, I leave when I worked in the city. We were on the far west side of Chicago proper, near a suburb called Oak Park, and my commute the last several years was, I get up, I get on a commuter train around 7 or 7:30, and I'm taking a 25-minute ride downtown, and then I've got a 20-minute walk to my office, and then I'm working until 6 or so, and then I'm gonna get back on a train, and I'm gonna walk in my house at 7:50 or 7:30, or if I got off really early, maybe it's 6:45 when I'm walking to the house. And then it's dealing with the kids, and if my wife has had a busy day or this and that, it's like, what's for dinner? And it's like, oh, I guess it's Thai food, and it's like, call the Thai place and then drive over 10 minutes to Thai place and have some beautiful food. But it's not, it's just a totally different thing, and it's not healthy. It's just, I mean, for the most part, it's just not a healthy way of living. I do miss my train rides though, because that was a nice time for reading and studying, that I have a harder time making time for. I'd been doing it so long. I was like, I would get on the commuter train, and then my morning time would be my nonfiction reading, studying time, and then my evening time would be either reading or listening to, podcast or fiction book or something like that. And I kind of had a real flow, but yeah, I don't miss those aspects of it at all. I commuted like that for about 20 years. And now I work from home, and my commute's really short. It's there's a bedroom door right back there. This is my office.
Yeah, but look at what you got now. Wrapping up here, and we touched on this a little bit already not too long ago. What would you tell people that want to get started?
Oh, I would just say get started. find a little place. Like we, I'm older and we have, a good career and we had some money to work with, so we were able to get something pretty big, pretty big space in the mountains that's really beautiful. But, um, I think there's a lot you could do with a lot less. And the reality is, I've got 30 acres, 20 of it I never walk in. And our operations right now exist on probably about 4 out of 10 acres that are in front. I mean, eventually we'll be using a lot of that. And that's our ambition. But, we could have a 10 times bigger garden and, more chickens that we have on 3 acres that are well laid out, you know. So finding, so, we're always, I'm all, I'm just all the time looking at real estate just out of curiosity. But, finding a place that has some kind of a water source with a decent climate that has some workable land and a house that you might be able to live in or restore, or some land that you might be able to build a house on, or whatever it might be. I mean, that's not out of reach. It doesn't have to be out of reach if you want it.
Right. Yeah.
So I think it's more about just going for it and starting where you are. And then there's great people that talk about, like if you're interested in homesteading, just start doing a lot of the stuff you'll need to do wherever you're at, like preserving food and learning how to make your own stuff, or starting with certain types of, whether you have space for backyard chickens, or I know there's like people in urban areas that keep quail. I mean, there's all kinds of things that you could do to kind of start pushing in that direction before you have land. But I mean, I guess it's just get serious about getting started and, find a place where you can exercise these muscles. And, it doesn't have to be a forever place. It could be a place that you put that you cut your teeth on and you put some time into, and then you learn and decide, what, I want a bigger place, or, what, I always thought I wanted a bigger place, but this is more than enough. And I don't need 20 acres or 100 acres or whatever it might be.
Sure.
There's a lot of people doing really cool stuff with fairly small amounts of land.
Yeah. Some of them are even more productive than people that have bigger tracts, because they have to maximize the space that they have, and it's really cool what they can pull off. Yeah.
But I think you just get started. Get off your computer, get out of your land. I mean, there are things I loved about Chicago. When I visit now, I don't enjoy it as much as I used to.
Sure.
I'm like, I want to go home.
Well, now that you're a conservative.
Oh yeah, no, it's like it's surrounded by all this blue stuff everywhere. No.
Well,
I think most people are decent people, is what I would say.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things that's nice about living out here. I think people are generally just like not. It's kind of like we don't talk about a lot of that stuff with neighbors. It's like you're good people and we're good people. We help each other out and we care about a lot of the same things. And that's when you're actually dealing with people face to face. It's a lot of the stuff that I guess gets a lot of traction online is just gone.
Sure.
Yeah.
Not always. My next door neighbor and I, we get along pretty well. We couldn't be more different politically, and we have never spoken politics. I only know his politics from when I had Facebook, and he would, share whatever political stuff on Facebook. I'm like, oh, huh. We just never talk about it, and it's not weird.
Yeah.
Turns out you don't have to talk about it. Imagine that.
Well, and if you're like the neighbors that we have around here, it's like everybody's interesting. Like
Mhm.
there was a party recently, and it's like I had so many good conversations, and I was like, we sort of have all self-selected for this kind of a lifestyle. So it's in one sense, it's like really surprising to have a lot of great conversations with
Mhm.
people that I don't know very well. Um, and then at the same time, it's not that surprising because we're all weirdos that wanted to move to the mountains and be
That's the
away from
common
people.
denominator. Yep.
you know?
Mhm.
So
Well, hey,
yeah,
was there anything else that you wanted to touch on that we didn't get to, or anything?
no, I've just had a good time talking. I wasn't sure
Same.
I wasn't sure. I just knew it was probably going to be a good conversation, and it was. So
That's all I ever want is good
good.
conversation. If people listen, they listen. But I'm here and I like it, so whatever.
Yeah, I had fun.
Yeah.
This is a great way to spend the evening.
Yes, I appreciate your time being here and looking forward to staying in touch. Uh,
Absolutely.
and we'll have you on again at some point. I'd also like to come out and check your place out. Looks cool.
Oh, please do.
Just from this hallway I'm seeing, looks cool.
It's a lot of wood
It's a lot of
inside.
wood. A lot of wood. I can see that. It's very wood heavy, but that's cool. That's a
Yeah,
nice flex. Um,
I can't complain.
can't complain. Perfect. Well, hey man, it was good meeting you, and
Yeah.
we'll stay in touch.
All right. Take care. Thanks.
Thanks. Great conversation with Ben. Interesting perspective on being only a year into his 30-acre homestead coming from a city garden. Thanks for watching, everyone. Please leave a comment, like, subscribe, and most importantly, share this video. You can check us out on Fountain FM podcast player. You'll love it. And if you don't, you can send me all your Satoshis you earned just by listening to your favorite podcasts and supporting those podcasters. Check out our website, farmhoplife.com. You can sign up for our email list or Telegram channel there to be notified when new videos, interviews, and podcasts are available. We are on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, MeWe, and Float. You can email me anytime, matt@farmhoplife.com. And you can go check out our 20 by 23 project where we're going to help out 20 homesteads in 2023. And I'm always looking for new people to interview. If you want to come on to talk about homesteading, farming, food security, homeschooling, regenerative agriculture, alternative building methods, or anything else, pitch me an idea. Go to farmhoplife.com/guest. Go feed yourself.
Inside of the city, the people are crazy, out of their minds, they ain't got a clue. We gone away, headed west for Montana, left family and friends, all I got now is you. We both got new jobs, a house and a homestead, thinking this was the life, all that there'd be. After our firstborn, you had to stay home. That's when the work got in the way for me. Well, I started Farm Hop Life. We'll come to your farm to help and to wander. Me and the family, a truck and an RV. Send us a message and there